Hello there. On today's episode of the review, I will be reviewing Joe Rogan's conversation with Richard Rawlings, podcast 1229. Richard Rawlings owns Gas Monkey Garage, which is a car show that you've probably seen. I was a little bit familiar with it. I've seen a few episodes. Some of them are really quite good. And if you're into those types of car shows, muscle car shows and the rebuild shows, it's definitely one of the better ones out there. Joe starts off his conversation, during his intro, he says how he and Richard kind of got off to an awkward start, and it was quite an awkward bit of conversation, but then they eased into it. I'd never heard Joe say that before that I could remember, and I really didn't feel like that conversation started out that way, so I wonder why Joe thought that. But it was a great conversation, so let's get reviewing.
Welcome to the Joe Rogan Experience Review, where each week I review every single episode of the Joe Rogan Experience. What more do you want?
Now, Richard explains early on that he actually wasn't originally a huge mechanic car guy in that sense. And what does that mean? Not that he doesn't know how to work on cars, but what really got him into the idea of pitching Gas Monkey back in like 2004 was just that he was basically a marketing guy. And he felt like there was a missing part in the market for kids and, housewives to enjoy car shows. He felt like all the other shows were kind of far too, male dominated and oriented, and he just kind of wanted a show that maybe the whole family could sit down and laugh at and have fun with. So he pitched it for a while. I had the garage set up, and in about 2012 he got his show, and obviously in the meantime learned a ton about how to work on cars and put things together, though he does say he's more of the business end of things. He sees the ideas and kind of works with it. He's, from what he was saying to Joe, is quite a huge entrepreneur too. Owns many, many companies, restaurants, bars. He owns like a healthcare service as well, which I found quite interesting because that's like way different. But he said he had thousands of patients and does some sort of healthcare thing for them, for like retired people. He talks a little bit about his dad being in a retirement home, which I felt was really quite funny. And he gets into that, talking about how there's a lot of STDs, a lot of chlamydia, a lot of those sorts of things in the old folks home, and that his dad, even though he has quite bad dementia, is actually just railing through women in this old folks home that he's at, and Richard finds that quite funny. Joe was cracking up too. It's a funny bit of the podcast, and it's quite silly to hear that because it's just something you don't think about going on in those old folks home. But hey, they're people too, folks, and late in their lives when they're not getting pregnant, maybe they're not thinking about protection, and this is how there's like rampant STDs being spread in these areas. But one thing that he really focuses on in his garage. So a lot of times he's rebuilding muscle cars. If you've seen the show, he rebuilds these cars and he's rebuilding them, selling them anywhere of upwards of like $300,000. He's putting a ton of money in. They make some pretty incredible cars out of that garage and on that show. And what he's trying to do really is kind of make about 20% on each sale, but at the end of the day he has his show, so even if he's not making a ton of profit on the cars, he's getting paid for the show, and that probably covers a ton of his overhead. He says that obviously he prefers the old car feel. So one thing that Joe has is, Joe Rogan's talked about it quite a bit, he has some sort of like early 60s Corvette that he has modern technology in. And I guess this is fairly common with people that can afford it, is they get older cars kind of redone with, traction control and Bluetooth and proper power steering and just better suspension, so that the ride is actually really comfortable and feels modern and is safe, even though you have the look of a much older vehicle. But Richard's saying that he actually prefers the older feel and the older car. One of his favorite cars, a car that he said that he would never sell, and I love that he brought this up because it's always been one of mine, is he rebuilt an old Mustang for a guy, a friend of his, a wealthy guy, that looked exactly like the Mustang from the movie The Thomas Crown Affair with Pierce Brosnan. Now, if you've seen that movie or you haven't seen it or you own it, just go to the scene where he takes the girl in the movie, whoever that is, I can't remember her name, to some sort of island. They go to like a Caribbean island, and the car that picks them up at the airport is this like raised Mustang that almost looks like a little beach buggy or kind of some sort of off-roader. Now it's I believe that one is a Shelby. It's like a Shelby but with big tires, and it really is one of the coolest fucking looking cars. It's so good. Google it if you get a chance. It's a brilliant car. I've always loved it, and I really like that movie too, to be honest. And he asked to borrow that car back from the person that he built it for when the show started, a few years after he built it, because he wanted cars that he'd made, in the showroom, and he got it back. I guess he got it shipped to him somehow, and he said everything in the car was really fucked up because the owner was just not taking care of it, not driving it, or the rest of it. So he told this guy, listen, you're a terrible owner. What have you done to this beautiful car? And this guy actually just gave it back to him. So that's cool. That's a cool story. And hey, it's nice to have rich friends, I guess. But, now this is one of the cars he said he'd never sell. He really loves it. And it's a badass ride. I don't blame him. Richard lives on a country club, and he was talking about living on there quite a bit. I mean, it was a silly conversation. These guys, bear in mind, were drinking the whole time. They were drinking the Gas Monkey Tequila that Richard makes. And Joe was saying it's real good. I guess it was cinnamon flavor. Try it if you see it. Joe really liked it. So they're getting liquored up, and he's telling this story about when he was living on his country club. And he was coming home one day, and he's always like kind of getting kicked out of there and causing some trouble. And he throws a burrito at the gate guard and just carried on home with his friends, not even thinking. Well, the police came to his house and arrested him and took him down to the gate for throwing that burrito. They wanted to get him on assault. And Joe brings it up too. Listen, if you're trying to get people on assault because they threw a burrito at you, you're a bitch. There's no other way of looking at it. That is such a bitch move. Horrific. Really embarrassing. But a funny story. A hell of a funny story. One of the things they talk about is like people running for president, being president, and the changes that could be made. And Joe was saying that there's some poll online that actually has him quite high up amongst a lot of other people for running for president. That's really no surprise because at the end of the day, Joe says it a lot. It's a popularity contest, and Joe certainly is very popular. And, he's not just popular in the, Kim Kardashian way. He's popular in a speaking, talking, educating himself, meeting fascinating people type way. So, I don't know. It would be a crazy choice, but it wouldn't be the worst. I mean, he would have to be more qualified going into it than Donald Trump, I think. I mean, at least Joe's definitely spoke to more intelligent people. I don't know. Who knows? But, it's a popularity contest. So who knows who's going to be president next? Probably Kanye West. Some of the best cars for both of them, and that being that they're big muscle guy cars, but even with some of the not so modern but like kind of modernish cars, they were talking about the M3. So like the turn of the millennium M3s, like 2001, 2002, a lot of power, hell of a car, and really the best car they were talking about ever was a 1960 something Mustang Boss. And the picture they brought up, you have to watch the podcast to see it, but it's a really badass Mustang. I mean, to be fair, it probably is the best fucking car I've ever seen. And it was wild. It was great. He was also talking, Richard's also talking about how he doesn't like the car from Fast and the Furious. Eleanor, that like Shelby 500. He says it's too overdone, too many people have it, blah, blah, blah. That might be true, but it's still such a freaking sweet car. I mean, to say that it was only cool before the movie because it was less popular doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, it's the same car, it's just as cool. It's not like I see him a lot. I live in LA, I don't see those things driving around all that much. So maybe he's just bored of it or bored of like putting them together, wants something more unique. But I really felt like that car is still one of the baddest cars in the world. I don't know. What's your favorite car? What's yours? Let me know. If you're into muscle cars and you love to see these rebuilds, check out Richard Rawlings' show, Gas Monkey Garage. It was great. And this was an awesome opportunity to get to know him better, get to see kind of how silly he is. And him and Joe had a good time, even though by the end of it, they were pretty wasted on tequila. But anyway, check it out. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate you listening. Talk soon. Bye.